Welcome to Saints and Sinners, where we delve into the lives of the devout and the damned, and the pivotal moments that shape church history. Each episode explores the triumphs and trials of saints striving for divinity and sinners wrestling with their flaws, set against the backdrop of historical events that are as miraculous as they are mysterious. Join us as we uncover the hidden truths of history's most enigmatic figures, where the sacred meets the scandalous, and the truths we uncover are stranger and more awe-inspiring than fiction. Today, for our initial episode, we dive into the history of the meaning of today, or maybe not today, depending on when you are listening to this. This is Saints and Sinners. They say the veil between the living and the dead is always thin, but once a year it wears paper thin. And if you listen ever so closely, you might just hear it tear. Not all holidays are what they seem. Some are for joy, others for remembrance, but a rare few are for something older, darker, and holier than most would dare imagine. This is the story of how 3 days came to be what most people think of one. But what if I told you that beneath the surface of this familiar trifecta lies a much older, stranger history, a story of ghosts and martyrs, of ancient fires and unshakable hope, a story that begins with fear and ends in glory. Centuries ago, long before what we witness today, towering infernos bigger than most bonfires would be lit on the hills of the Celtic Isles, meant to drive back whatever might be lurking in the dark. The night marked the end of harvest and the start of winter. The time in the year where the veil between life and death was at its thinnest. A night when crops died, light faded, and the world seemed to pause. It was a time the ancients feared, when they believed spirits could return. But not just any spirits. Oh no, these were the restless ones, souls with business unfinished, or worse, creatures not of this world at all. So the villagers wore masks, animal skins, horrid faces carved into gourds, not to celebrate, but to hide, to blend in, to fool whatever walked the roads that night into thinking they were one of them. If you passed yourself off well enough, you just might survive the night. And if you left food out, they might just eat and pass on. That's the story anyway. The one that flickers in history books and trivia podcasts. A festival called Samhain, a so-called Celtic New Year's Eve, soaked in pagan ritual and shadowy lore. Sound familiar? Well, here's the thing. That story, it's not the full one. In fact, it might not even be the real one. You see, Samhain was real, a Gaelic harvest festival marking the end of the light and the start of the dark. Winter. Not actually November 1st. And it belonged to Ireland, not some sweeping unified Celtic religion, because the truth is, there was no single Celtic faith, just a patchwork of tribes and tongues stretching across Spain, France, Scotland, and Wales, and Turkey, and a million other places, each with their own customs, gods, and ghosts. And this so-called fire festival, there's no real evidence it involved witches, or ghouls, or even jack-o'-lanterns. And November 1st? That date came later. Much later. In fact, the word Celtic today is more likely to mean a Boston basketball team, or, if you're the Secret Service, a certain former president's code name. Let's not get distracted. The real story? It begins in the heart of Rome, in a basilica, in the year 735 AD. A Pope Gregory III dedicated a chapel to all the saints, known and unknown, and chose a date for their remembrance, November 1st. Then, in 837, another Pope, Gregory IV, takes it global, a feast for the faithful departed, a holy day of obligation. And the day before, it became known as All Hallows Eve, or in Old English, All Hallows Eve, or in the Old German tongue, Halloween. Still, one day wasn't enough, because not every soul who dies is a saint. Not yet. And so came All Souls Day, championed by a Benedictine monk around the year 1000, St. Odilo of Cluny. He called the church to pray, not just for the blessed in heaven, but for the souls in purgatory, those still being refined like gold by fire, where his works will be burned up, and he will suffer the loss, but he himself will be saved. That date, November 2nd. There, a holy trilogy was born, but not everyone welcomed it. When the Reformation cracked the church like a fault line, saints and souls were just swept away. Reformers, like Luther, tossed out the very books that called for prayers for the dead, 2 Maccabees and Sirach among them. Although the Gospel of Matthew, Corinthians, Romans, Timothy, and Zechariah give way to it, not to mention the deep Jewish tradition of doing so, a tradition that Christ himself, being a Jew, and specifically the King of the Jews, did regularly. And with theology gutted, so the festivals went. Or rather, they were repurposed. You see, when the sacred is rejected, the world finds something else to celebrate. Soul cakes given to the poor children in exchange for prayers turned into trick-or-treats. Lantern-lit processions for St. Martin of Tours morphed into costumes and candy grabs. A night of reflection, now a carnival of chaos. The feasting on candy and dress-up, which is a cousin to Mardi Gras celebrations in exercising appetites and joy before the solemn season, has turned into gluttony and demonic obsessions. Halloween didn't begin as a horror show. It began as a holy vigil celebration, akin to Christmas Eve. And the real fright is how easily we forget. But not all is lost. In recent years, even some of our Protestant brothers and sisters have begun to reclaim it. Trunk or treats, family dinners, church gatherings that honor the dead and lift the living. It may not be the feast it once was in the eyes of popular culture, but it's a flicker of the flame, a rekindling of an ember long forgotten in our secular world that the church has kept alive in such a moment as this. 3 days, one mystery, a vigil, a celebration, and a solemn prayer. It begins on the eve of October 31st, culminates with All Saints' Day, and ends with All Souls' Day. The triduum of the dead. Not a celebration of fear, but of faith. Not a descent into darkness, but a reach toward the light. Today, you're stepping into something truly ancient, something bigger than costumes and cauldrons. You're stepping into a mystery, a drama between time and eternity, a conversation between heaven, earth, and what lies beyond the veil. And the thing about veils is, they don't say shut forever. These holidays are dedicated to a specific purpose in our spiritual lives. But when we untether them from the church, they and we devolve into debauchery. So before you throw on horns or play dress up as a risque version of a profession that deserves a little more dignity, try and remember what these days are really about. Because this isn't just spooky season. It's the season of souls, where memento mori isn't a trendy stoic catchphrase. It's a sacred whisper from the church. Remember, you too will die. Not to glamorize death, but to reawaken life. So if you choose to step into costume, maybe skip the pitchfork. Instead, consider the halo. Robes over fishnets, sword of virtue over plastic scythe. dressed like those who actually wrestled demons and won. Halloween doesn't mean canceling candy. It means taking back the flame, one saint at a time. This is Saints and Sinners, where we wrestle with the holy and the haunted, the miraculous and the misunderstood, because saints rise, sinners fall, and history bears witness. If this story stirred something in you, hit follow and subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's ready to see the Halloween trilogy in a whole new light. Join us next time as we journey into the lives of those who've walked the line between shadow and sanctity. Until then, keep your lantern lit.